We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, and I'm a partnerships manager here at AllVoices, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Today, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest, Gianna Driver. She is the Chief People Officer at BlueVine. Thank you so much for being here, Gianna. I'm excited to dive into our conversation.
Thanks for having me, Christina. I'm excited too.
Yes, of course. If you want to start off by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself, including your pronouns, and what is something, and this can be anything, that has recently brought you joy.
So Gianna Driver, pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I lead our people and places function here at BlueVine. We're a fintech company serving small and mid-sized companies. What really resonated with me was the second part of that question around what's brought me joy.
Yeah.
I'm excited that our world is starting to reopen. I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I see the joy in her face as she comes home from school every day. And I'm actually speaking to you from one of our offices in downtown Redwood City, California. Mm-hmm. And it's surreal and amazing and joyful to be able to do a very basic human activity, which is to gather with our friends and colleagues.
Absolutely. I definitely miss gathering in a professional setting with coworkers and team members, and also personally with family and friends. And it's so nice to see people that are able to do that now. And just speaking of coworkers, what is something that you really value in one of your team members in terms of characteristics or anything like that?
Yeah. Wow. I truly value so many things in my colleagues. I would say the connection to show up authentically and fully and as we are with one another. That's something that I really value. And it's something that has shown through these last 14, 15 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in our previous, our pre-call conversation as well, we were talking about your experience and just your passion for working in this space and at BlueVine. How do you think your personal journey has really led up to this point to be a Chief People Officer?
Christina, that's a deep question. I think I am who I am because of all of my previous experiences. And that would be true of anyone. And one of the things that I think is integral to being a successful HR professional, be that an HR manager, director, VP, senior VP, et cetera, is the ability to connect empathetically with other humans from all walks of life, to be truly inclusive. And I think growing up where I grew up in a women's shelter in a small town in East Texas, and having a pretty rough start to life for the first 17 years, I think really helped me understand that we're all people. It doesn't matter where we're from or the culture we have or the language we speak or the color of our skin. The common denominator is that we're all people and we all want to be part of organizations and groups that are mission driven and bigger than we are. And we want to have impact.
Yeah, we want to have impact, and that human-centric approach is so important, and definitely appreciate you sharing your personal journey as well and being vulnerable on our kind of podcast here today too. But folks come in with different experiences, as we were talking about too, and maybe they didn't have psychological safety in their kind of previous roles or companies. How do you think about, psychological safety and inclusion in the candidate experience as people are looking to join BlueVine in a different environment?
Mm-hmm, totally. Well, first of all, inclusion and psychological safety starts during the recruiting process. It doesn't begin on day one when someone becomes an employee. And one of the things we've been very intentional about is crafting an interview process where we are even changing the terms that we use. So instead of using terms like culture fit, we use the term culture add. We don't want candidates who become employees to just fit into our culture. We want people who are going to be additive, who are going to bring their own spice, flair, and flavor and their own magical touch to BlueVine. So for us, this journey of psychological safety, be who you are, be proud of who you are, begins really from day one of engaging with us. And then that journey, follows through the employee experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely starts early on as well. And even arguably when someone is researching a company or their potential manager on social media or on the website, just the messages that are communicated there as well. So say someone does interview and they're just like, I want to be part of the BlueVine culture. And then they get to a point where they're meeting their manager. We've seen a lot of kind of articles and news come out around just the changing role of managers and how to cultivate and motivate a team. How do you see the role of just really managers differentiate now as opposed to a year ago?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this pandemic has really forced all of us, managers, leaders, ICs, to be a bit more raw with one another. As we talked about, I happen to be in an office today, but I'm often, mostly these days, working from home. And so part of that rawness and that humanness might mean being interrupted by my daughter who's having an issue with, navigating Zoom or any other host of different issues that I've seen my colleagues have. So part of that vulnerability and empathetic human approach it's been forced upon us because of this pandemic. And I think that's been nice to in some ways to be invited into people's homes and to have this human-centric connection that we didn't before. One of the other things that we're focused on here at BlueVine is in our learning and development initiatives, really weaving in DEIB, so diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. We believe very strongly that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging is inextricably linked to learning, development, and being an amazing manager. Amazing managers should be amazing managers and leaders to all employees, not just to those who are more closely related to them and more similar.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that as well. And there's that additional layer of just being vulnerable, leading with empathy, and also just checking in on team members as well in a different way. How do you think about really employee engagement from a holistic perspective, really with everybody, no matter where they are in the world, on your team and just BlueVine in general?
Yeah, well, part of being truly inclusive, I think, involves communication. So having those really open lines of communication where employees, no matter if they're in Israel, India, Jersey City, Salt Lake, any remote for that matter, can share how they're feeling, what matters to them, and give us feedback in real time about things that are going well, and then also things that we might be able to do better or differently. And one of the things that's been really beautiful about being so connected to one another during this time has been our employees have let us know the things that they love and the things that they want us to improve on. And this journey of inclusion isn't a once and done, check the box and you're finished, right? It's an iterative process that we're continually trying to improve and expand upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there needs to be a sense of trust within employees as well to provide the good, the bad, the ugly feedback, and just give that as well to managers or whoever's reading it as well, or whatever platform, if it's one-on-one with your manager or anything like that. Are there any changes that you have made based on feedback that will be long lasting at BlueVine, either happened over the past year throughout the pandemic or things like that in terms of strategy?
Yeah, so several things. We started our BlueVine Diversity and Inclusion Council, which we refer to internally as the BDIC. And within the BDIC, we have employee resource groups or affinity groups that are tailored to specific areas of focus. That could be LGBTQIA+ initiatives, or there's an AAPI, Asian American Pacific Islander group. There are Latinx groups. So there are different employee-led initiatives like this. We as an organization are also deeply committed to continuing what started during the pandemic, which is a series of ongoing sessions around financial literacy. One of the things that we realized is different folks are approaching financial literacy from different places. Not all of us grew up in homes where we learned about 401ks and saving for retirement and all of this. We've got folks who are saddled with thousands of dollars of student debt. And so explaining to them just some of the basics for how to get out of debt and stuff like that. So our employees have very, very positively responded to our financial empowerment series that I think will be ongoing for sure.
Absolutely. I want a financial empowerment series as well. I think that's so beneficial and helpful because everybody is at a different part of their also financial journey, whether they have a lot of student loans and just buying property for the first time, or with a family. And just, I think it's an important conversation, especially because of the nature of BlueVine's business as well. That's a great professional development opportunity for for employees. You mentioned employee resource groups and the council that was put together throughout this past year. Could you talk a little bit more about BlueVine's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and why that's important to the company?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, we believe fundamentally that more diverse employee groups create better companies, and better companies create better solutions in the world. So we're deeply committed to diversity, and diversity in all types and flavors. It could be life experience diversity, it could be age diversity, it could be gender, it could be race, ethnic, all sorts of diversity in its most encompassing sense. What was the second part of that question, Christina?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just wondering a little bit more about your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and why it's important to BlueVine as well.
Yep, sorry. So as I was mentioning before, what we've started are these series of monthly events that we're doing across all of our offices that are focused on different ERG specific causes. So we just had our Asian American Pacific Islander initiatives. And so every Wednesday morning, one of our amazing talent team members had a fun trivia type of thing that was just very, very just fun and engaging, and the feedback has been super positive. And this raises awareness. We had a panel during some of the Asian hate crimes that were happening, and several of our leaders who identify as Asian showed up in a really raw and vulnerable way, and in a way that made it feel safe for other people to talk about these horrible acts of violence that have been happening in our communities. We have done peaceful protests with some of our employees. We have, so I can go on and on with the different sorts of initiatives, but every month we have various company-sponsored and employee-led things that it's really beautiful to see people come together and connect as individuals. Like, these things are not necessarily always about, product and business and what we're doing. This is a much more human flavored approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a common thread throughout the conversation we've been having as well, in terms of, I mean, typically, like over this past year, we would be in each other's homes on Zoom, and it's really hard to separate that line between the professional and personal life. So I think employee resource groups are a great way to connect with community and just have employee engagement on like a 360 human level as well. So I think that is also really, really great. How do you think about, especially as a people leader in the organization, like burnout amongst employees? I know that's a conversation in the space right now in terms of encouraging folks to take time off and just how to, preventatively think about how not to wear out employees, especially over this past year where folks maybe weren't taking vacation because they typically weren't traveling or didn't have any of those, mental health days to have plans after that.
Yeah, totally. So burnout is something that we've thought a lot about because our employees have been very resilient during this crazy time. And we partnered with the SBA and some other organizations as part of the PPP initiative. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible to see how our employees really rallied and put in the time and energy because they knew that there were lives that we were directly impacting and jobs that we were helping to save through PPP. Well, the result of that is that when you're working 60, 70 hours a week, week after week, you do start to feel tired and fatigued. Yeah. So along these lines, we started a series of thank you days to our employees where we said, these are days that we want you to take off. We want you to do some self-care. We want you to do whatever would be calming and relaxing for you. For some employees, that was staying home and sleeping. For others, it was doing an extended long weekend road trip somewhere. For others, it was doing yoga in their backyard. I mean, we had people doing all sorts of different things. And so that was one way that we wanted to address burnout. We also have regularly sent various types of care packages to people's homes so that they have the physical tools, resources, and things for self-care if that was something that appealed to them. Mm-hmm. Additionally, we've done a number of voluntary events that have been, through Zoom. So we did a guided meditation several times with very, very positive feedback. We did, I didn't know this existed, but it's incredible. Chair yoga. So we all videos were on for most of us. And there are all different sorts of poses and moves that you can do at your desk with, chair yoga. So we've done just a lot of fun, creative, different types of activities to address burnout specifically.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you, just all the different examples as well, is it's not a one size fits all approach, because employees recharge and just relax in different ways, and offering these different options and benefits and events is really great for a variety of different folks who are at the organization. So I think that's super important. What is something that people might not know about kind of the job of a chief people officer? Like, what is the hardest part of your job, and how do you make it less hard?
Oh gosh. I would say that people leaders are often that bridge between employees and the business. Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to hold both. And often that's a seamless and beautiful way of doing that. There are certainly times, though, where that's more challenging. And so for me personally, my inclination is to err on the side, just my wiring of being a people pleaser. I like bringing people joy and feeling like I've done something to brighten their day or make them happy. Unfortunately, as a people leader, that's not always possible. You can't make everyone happy all the time. Mm-hmm. And so being able to be okay with that, and knowing that we're doing what we can to help everyone come together and have conflict resolution and see one another's perspectives and approach disagreements with kindness and humility and self-awareness. The tricky part there is everyone has to lean in and buy into that. And one of the hardest parts is when you don't always feel like you've been successful in helping that. The good news is most of the time it goes very well, but there are those instances where we can't make everyone happy all the time. And that's hard. That's hard for me. And I think that's hard for many of my colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially on the team as well. Is there another kind of fellow, either whether it's a CPO or anyone in the leadership space of people in HR and talent that you like admire as well for whatever reason? Just like always like to ask as well.
Yeah, so someone that I've never met in person, but I just hang off of her every word, book, podcast, name it, is Brene Brown. I just think she's done so much for humanity, for companies, and for people leaders. I apologize for the train now that I'm back in the office.
No worries.
Outside. So she has two podcasts that I listen to when I am out for a walk or a run that are just fantastic and amazing. I feel like I learned something, and I'm just delighted that there are other people who are also listening to Dr. Brown and her various guests. So I just, again, admire her so much.
Plus one for me as well. I enjoy her TED Talk and her Netflix special, and also I need to listen to her podcasts. I think it's really great for especially just studying vulnerability, like all of these topics that are a little bit taboo to talk about, especially now with work. We're starting to talk about it even more. So I love that example.
And one of the things around inclusivity, Christina, that I think is very important is I encourage other people leaders and other organizations to lean into hard things. We have to be able to discuss the things and name those things that are taboo, because we start to build them up in ways that are unhealthy when we avoid them, when we don't actually acknowledge, wow, this is a really hard conversation, or this really makes me uncomfortable. I think we've got to be able to lean into that and build that emotional resiliency and those skills so that we can engage in those ways. And again, we don't always have to come out on the other side having everyone agree, and that's not the goal. Right. But to have everyone show up and lean in, I think that's really important as part of our becoming more inclusive workplaces.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important as well. And one of the questions that I also wanted to ask too is because kind of with all of your experience, I think it was over 15 years at large companies, small companies, public,
Yeah.
private, across the board. Have you seen any like common mistakes, maybe with well-intentions for a people strategy that you have like thought about and you're like, I'm definitely going to do this differently moving forward, or just like they were kind of more of learning moments as well, speaking of hard conversations?
Mm-hmm. Gosh, there's so many. One of the ones that comes to mind is feeling like the work is done, because this is work that will never be done, and that's not the goal. We don't ever want to be done, because the moment we declare that we are done and finished is affirmation that we're not done, and we have a lot more work to do. This is hard stuff. Changing and evolving and becoming more self-aware is hard. It's painful. Sometimes you are looking at information or understanding how you may have made other people feel, and unintentionally, but taking a hard look at that, really unearthing, well, where does that come from in me? And then starting to unlearn and then relearn takes time, and it's hard work. And I've worked in organizations where things have been more of a check the box. Okay, yeah, we've done that. Yeah, we've got so many women on the team. Yep. Okay, there's stories. Check. Well, that's not the metric of success. You don't do that and then dust it off and sort of, put it in a corner and say, I'm finished. So I would say it's important for all of us to remember that these processes, this work that we're doing is, it's a journey. It's not a destination.
Yeah, it's a journey, it's not a destination. And I know a lot of times, especially with talent strategies or diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, folks want to see those hard quantitative and qualitative metrics. But if you hit those metrics, we make new benchmarks and we measure progress another way. It's not just check the box and we're done here. So I definitely agree with that mentality as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess on the flip side, in terms of the future, very ominous, is there a trend that you're seeing that people leaders as individuals or companies really need to be aware of in order to be successful in the future?
So one of the things that I'm very excited about is when I look at the tools and technology that is enabling leaders and organizations to communicate directly to dispersed, distributed, diverse workforces. Yeah. I get really excited because technology is just beautiful, beautiful thing and huge enabler. And what technology also allows is for us to start looking at patterns, at trends, analyzing data and information. AllVoices is a tool that I'm very excited about because it does allow leaders to, in a very quantifiable and objective way, start looking at information so that we can make more informed and better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Data informed, insight driven decisions, and also the option for anonymous feedback as well, because at the end of the day, you can have the best culture in the world, right? But if people are coming in with all these different experiences, 20 years working at a place or multiple places where their voice wasn't heard, it's really hard to change behavior there. So I think that's so important. And we're seeing a lot of emerging technologies as well that really help folks in their day-to-day, since the future of work is that people aren't going to be in one HQ all the time together. So communication is super important.
Right. And seeing the unseen, hearing those who are unheard. And that makes me very excited. And that's a trend that I think is here to stay. And I get giddy as I think about what this will enable us to do to become better all around, more inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there something that people would be surprised to know about you, or just like a fun fact that you would want to share with our listeners?
Let's see, that people would be surprised to know. So I'll be vulnerable here. I'm like practicing this myself. I have been told that I can come across as very confident, like most of the time. And I don't know. I think that's probably more of a learned characteristic and trait. But I have a lot of fears and insecurities. There are many times where I don't feel confident. And so what I would share is I have those very human experiences and feelings too. And I try to identify it, acknowledge it. I think that's important, and then set it aside and not be defined by that, and then continue forward. But I'm very much a work in progress.
Yeah, no, I think that's very vulnerable and I appreciate that as well. And also nobody is perfect, even though, it might look like that on social media or on LinkedIn or the service. You do come off very confident, which I appreciate, but I think that definitely makes sense. There's just lots of things going on. Do you have a proudest moment either at BlueVine or throughout your career where you were just like in that moment of flow thinking this is exactly where I'm supposed to be? This is such a gratifying moment, especially in this industry where it's a long-term commitment. So you might not see the fruits of your labor right away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I often have these types of moments here at BlueVine with my team. One of the things that's happened multiple times in the last several months has been during a meeting or after a meeting, I pause and I pinch myself. And I pinch myself because I'm like, wait, am I for real? Like, is this experience really happening where I get to do really fun stuff, sometimes hard stuff,
Yeah.
but with a team of people who are just so dynamic, incredible, motivated, thoughtful, driven, high integrity, all of that stuff. We have an incredibly strong people and places team. And I can't believe that I get to be a part of this team. And I'm just so honored and humbled to do the things that we get to do together. And it just makes me I love them. They're amazing.
Do you have any advice for folks who are looking to join the BlueVine team as you expand and grow? And maybe people who are listening would want some advice from you.
Well, I mean, if you want to join our team, go to our careers page, reach out to us on LinkedIn as well. What I would say is leading with these values that we're talking about, Christina. I don't think that this is rocket science at the end of the day. It takes intentionality, it takes consistency. You'll fail often, iterate quickly, and keep on going. And as we were talking about in the recruiting interviewing process, when I'm looking at candidate resumes for my team, as an example, I am looking through and intentionally looking for collaborative types of comments and statements in the interview process. I love behavioral questions. Tell me about a time when, if you were to describe, X, Y, and Z, how would you like? So those are the things that really help us understand someone's core. What makes them feel most alive? When do these folks thrive? And I think about, okay, can I see that person joining our team and adding that magical flavor to our team and to our company? And in that way, we've been able to one by one really add just amazing talent to our company and to the people places team. They're truly just such a fantastic group of folks.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great place to work and thrive and really grow and have that growth mindset, rewarded as well for being innovative and being a culture add as well, as you mentioned at the top of our conversation too, instead of just a culture fit. I think that's something that has been coming up in these conversations as well, in terms of you don't just want to hire someone who would be your friend or just someone you could go to happy hour with. It's
Right.
people who you want to challenge you and just have diverse perspectives in every sense of the word, to really push the team and the product forward.
And one of the things that we have talked about internally on our team, as we're looking to fill roles, and I'm speaking specific now to the people and places team, when we're doing our candidate debriefs and stuff, sometimes folks may have that natural inclination to want to hire folks who are more like them.
Yeah.
But what's beautiful is others on the team have that psychological safety where we can kindly and gently point out, well, hold on a second, would you have that same perspective if this were, insert whatever that profile of someone who would be very, very different.
Right.
So what's nice is that we've created this environment where we're able to have that psychological safety and those really high integrity, but sometimes difficult conversations. And then folks are pretty self-aware, and they're humble. And so when you gently point something out, people are very quick to say, wow, that's a really good call out and a great aha moment. Let me think about that. And so we've actually course corrected and made offers to people we might not otherwise have, or vice versa, right? Maybe not made an offer to someone. And so that's the power of the team, and that's the power of a diverse team specifically.
Yeah, the power of a diverse team to bring in their different perspectives, their different questions and curiosities, but also I think you're right, having that psychological safety amongst the interviewers as well, just to have a conversation. I remember I was working at a company and part of the interview committee. I honestly don't remember what the comment was, but it was a little ageist because the candidate was older. And afterwards, they like had a conversation about it, and he was mortified, but also I think it's a Maya Angelou quote: "When you know better, you do better," and you just move forward and you have that growth mindset as well.
Totally. Our CEO, Christina, he really embodies what you just said, where when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
One of the things around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging is we won't always get it right.
Yeah.
But when we stumble, it's important to pause, take a moment, acknowledge, course correct, and then move on. And because we have a CEO who really embodies that and models that for us, it then creates an environment and culture where it's okay to make mistakes, and to gently point out if you have been offended or affected by someone who's said something inadvertently or written something or whatnot. So I think it does start at the top and the most senior levels of leadership, really modeling this for everyone else.
Yeah, modeling goes a long way in terms of just being humble and having that mindset. And also, I think to our earlier conversation as well, in regards to mental health and taking those days off and just ensuring that, you know, you're seeing your managers and leaders also do those things is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I know we've covered a bunch of different topics in our time here today, but always like to ask as the final question of if there's anything you would like to either reemphasize or anything you'd like to talk about that we didn't get to in the conversation that you really want our listeners at AllVoices to know.
So I would say number one, and really the only thing that I want to emphasize is we're in this together. Let's be real. Let's be vulnerable. Let's admit we won't always get it right, but when we stumble, let's stumble forward, and let's learn and do the best that we can to bring our teams and our organizations with us. We're doing important work. It's really hard work, but our world needs us to do this work.
Yeah, I think that's a great call to action and a very hopeful message as well. So I think that's a great point to end on. Thank you so much, Gianna, for being a guest on Reimagining Company Culture.
Thanks, Christina. It was great.
Yes, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, AllVoices believes in the empowerment of everyone and organization at any level to speak up and believe it's a necessity in order for everyone to succeed. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.